Beautiful. Awesome. All right. Cool. Let's get into it. I know some of the times when we are struggling, okay, things like hormonal acne or unexpected weight gain, mood swings, irritability, energy issues, right? Remember, none of it's your fault. Okay, it is a sign of dysregulated hormones. And if you're feeling out of sync with your body, there is a root cause. And one of the most common root causes is being in a state of depletion. All right, what typically happens, and this is very common in athletes or competitors, anybody who's done a dieting phase, is that we start to lose weight. Like the first time you diet, it is so successful. Anybody ever experienced that? You're like, the first time I did it, easy, easy peasy. Yeah, then your body starts to hit the panic button because it doesn't like change. All right, and it actually becomes protective of its fat reserves. And so my coaches probably know this, right? You go so far and then you hit a wall and you have to drop calories again to see results. Well, you're human, and believe it or not, you can only go so far to drop your food before the body really starts to have what's called metabolic compensation. All right, that's where the body is stalling, okay, to adjust to what you're doing for it. All right. And so when we want to start to reverse this or make changes to overcome that body's resistance to weight loss or hormonal balance, we have to address the hormonal hierarchy. All right, we're going to spend a lot of time with this. You see a picture here. I'm going to talk a lot of cortisol and insulin. I'm actually going to skip the thyroid. We spent an entire hour on this in a few weeks, and then we'll dive into sex hormones. So tier one, all right, you'll notice this is an upside down pyramid for a reason. A lot of the times when we think hormone imbalance, we think sex hormones, right? Estrogen, progesterone, testosterone. And the truth is there are other hormones further up the stream that are going to affect your estrogen or your progesterone. If we don't balance these top ones first, then working on your estrogen or testosterone levels, it can actually be counterproductive. And so that's the way we address things here, at least in my program in functional medicine, and we use what's called this hormonal hierarchy. So talking about these first two, let's get into cortisol and insulin. Okay, so cortisol is labeled as the bad guy, but it's actually okay in small doses, right? Glucose is not on here, but it's very tightly related with both cortisol and insulin. And glucose is the type of sugar that you get from the foods you eat, and it's going to be our body's primary energy source. Okay, it's not a hormone, right? It's an energy source, but it works very closely with cortisol and insulin. All right, and insulin is what's going to absorb your glucose in the bloodstream. So you guys know I love my analogies. If you're to think of a car's fuel tank, right, the way a car goes, without the key, which is insulin, the glucose can't get in and your car isn't going to work properly. Okay, so glucose is what you need to function, like your gas tank, and insulin is what allows your body to use it effectively, just turning on the key. All right, so that's why it's so important to keep insulin levels healthy. I do want to talk about when to eat. This is really important. Fiber first, proteins and fats, save the carbs for last, because each macronutrient impacts our blood sugar differently. Okay, this is a little bit more than nitty gritty, and we have it here in our chart. But carbohydrates, they're going to actually raise your blood sugar levels directly because they're broken straight into glucose. Okay, so that's why we have the highest response in our blood sugar when we consume carbohydrates. Can be very useful, right? We talk about pre and post workout meals. It's really important to include carbohydrates in those so we can use them for energy. Protein's kind of in the middle. Proteins don't contain glucose specifically, but the amino acids actually can be converted into glucose. And so it's important to monitor that, and also know that its effect is going to be lower compared to carbohydrates. So, people like eat these really high protein diets and then wonder why they're not losing weight. If this happens a lot with keto, it's actually because they're overdoing it on the protein. They're still getting these crazy blood sugar spikes. So something to know. And then fats, they have a minimal direct impact on blood sugar levels. It's like hardly anything, but fats are important because they can influence how quickly carbohydrates and proteins are absorbed, and that can affect the raise of blood sugar. So there's this feedback loop between cortisol and blood sugar levels. And so when we have high blood sugar, okay, that's going to stimulate the release of insulin, which then in turn is going to promote that uptake of the glucose, right? Turning on the car so we can use the fuel. If we have chronically low blood sugar levels, okay, we're in that starvation depleted mode, it's going to actually be counteracted because cortisol is going to release in order to break down your body for blood sugar. If you chronically have low blood sugar, your body needs energy to run, okay? If we're constantly in depletion mode, your body will release cortisol, break itself down. So this is important. Somebody actually posted in Slack the other day about being able to sleep a little bit better, not waking up in the middle of the night hungry. It's because she was actually experiencing like lower blood sugar at night, and it was waking her up because her body was like, hey, I'm hungry. If you've ever participated in a prep before, your sleep starts to go because of this. Okay, so you want to make sure that we are eating often and we are eating enough. And if we're going to talk about when to eat, I'm going to talk about fasting. I do want to switch gears. We've talked about like certain macronutrients and how to eat them, but I do want to talk about when we are eating in the day. And I'm not going to go really far into fasting, but I just want to explain the differences between fasting and why intermittent fasting tends to work for men and why it doesn't tend to work for women. Typically in history and mythology, the sun is a man or a male figure, and the moon is a female figure. And the sun represents our circadian rhythm, which is a 24-hour sleep-wake cycle. Okay, the moon has different cycles. We just had a full moon yesterday. Okay, that is a 28-day cycle. Well, men have a 24-hour hormone cycle. Women typically have a 28-day hormone cycle. Because of that, our world is structured around the sunshine, and that's great. But it doesn't work for some aspects of our hormones, and that includes when we can eat in certain windows. So typically, intermittent fasting is going to be extremely successful for men because their hormones just reset day in and day out. Okay, for those who are menopausal, you don't typically have to worry about some of this timing. You actually can typically be okay with some of the intermittent fasting principles, depending on where your hormone levels are at. But for those who are cycling, all right, let's talk about what fasting would look like. When we're talking about hormone levels, okay, they're going to rise and fall throughout the 28-day cycle, and we have these phases. Okay, and these phases are, by the way, there's some argument in this space about what's phase 1 and what's phase 2. This is based on literature and the research, so I'm just going to go off that. But we have a phase 1 here. It's actually going to be when we are having our period in menses. Okay, it's kind of menses into the follicular phase. You usually bleed around 5-ish days and then head into your follicular phase. At this time, hormones are pretty low, and they're going to be on their way up when you head into phase 2, which is our ovulation. Okay, sex hormones are all rising a little bit, and estrogen is going to predominate. Okay, after that, we head into phase 3. It's a little bit shorter here, and things drop after ovulation. A lot of the times, energy levels tend to drop too, and that's okay. And then they start to rise again, heading into this nurture phase of your luteal phase and heading into menstruation again. So we are prepping for a bleed. In general, if you're going to practice fasting principles as a cycling female, it is going to be better to do that in phase 1 and in phase 3. And the reason being is because in phases 2 and 4, progesterone is trying to come up. And progesterone likes food. Progesterone loves carb sources, and we don't want to deplete it. A lot of the times we will see cycles go when women practice intermittent fasting because they aren't honoring their progesterone production. So kind of talking about progesterone, right? We do want to remind ourselves that our sex hormone production is contingent on this hierarchy. And we do need to test cortisol first in order to ensure that the nervous system's in a good place. So like I said before, we'll spend a whole hour on the thyroid. We'll dive into that in a few weeks. So we're going to go into tier 3, our sex hormones. And I want you to think of our sex hormones like siblings. And it's kind of funny. A brother or sister that is like kind of similar to you. You guys can live together, but like totally different personalities. So your sex hormones are the same. So if we want to think about estrogen, like I very much resonate with estrogen. Like she's a go-getter. She's super active, adventurous, like kind of pushing herself to evolve, do better, super outgoing, like loves a good steak. Progesterone is like my sister, who is a total homebody, like loves spending time in the kitchen. She's like all about nurturing herself and the people around her, like calm and collected, like for sure. I feel like I have some of those traits too, but like progesterone like loves carbs. That is also my sister, loves carbs. And then testosterone, I don't have a brother. I have 4 sisters, but if we had a brother, it'd be like our imaginary brother. who shows up, make sure that we're like gonna extend the species, like kind of comes around during ovulation, and testosterone is going to be a lot less prevalent in women. It does spike around ovulation, which is why people get frisky, right? It's going to support our metabolism, support our ovaries, all good things. Okay. And we want to make sure we're supporting these hormones at certain parts of our cycle. So I showed you that map a little bit earlier, and we want to encourage the production of estrogen and progesterone in those different phases. And so in the days where you can fast, okay, those are also days that we would encourage estrogen production. Okay, those are kind of those phase 1, phase 3. And so foods that are really great to support estrogen are going to be pumpkin seeds, flax seeds, almonds, cashews, pretty much all nuts. Chickpeas are really great, beans, lots of fiber, cruciferous veggies like broccoli, cauliflower, berries have lots of fiber, and spinach. Okay. Progesterone supported foods. Again, these are better more towards ovulation and your luteal phase. Those are going to be like the sesame seeds, sunflower seeds, potatoes, beets. Squash is really good. Brussels sprouts, bananas, mangoes, citrus fruits. I like to call the progesterone supporting foods nature's carbs. I'm going to head into about 4 of the most common symptoms I see and hormonally, and what the nutrition fixes are. So the first one for symptom relief is going to be breast tenderness. This happens a lot from 1 of 2 reasons, typically coming from an estrogen dominance or a vitamin E deficiency. So for support, including foods like cruciferous veggies are really nice. Again, high fiber. We touched on seed cycling. Almonds are really high in vitamin E, so they're great to incorporate. And then limiting stressors like alcohol and caffeine are going to be huge for really anything hormonal. But I do see a lot of changes when we have tender breasts and estrogen dominance. So things to consider. The next one is going to be headaches. Okay. If you're somebody who's experiencing headaches a lot, I want you to start keeping a journal or maybe a note on your phone and keep track of your triggers. Like, I have a headache now. What happened in the hour prior? What happened maybe in the 30 minutes prior? And see if you can start to correlate symptoms. Okay. A lot of the times it can be from our environment, but if it is triggered from food, it's usually the stuff that we already know isn't good for us. So like additives, alcohol is a big one. Okay, I also always like to ask when somebody's like, I'm experiencing headaches, like, what's your hydration level like? You ever drinking enough water? Do we have a good electrolyte balance? All right. And then ginger and turmeric are really nice to help reduce inflammation and head pain. Next one, hormonal acne. So acne can come up for quite a few reasons. A lot of the time it's actually due to something in the gut, something in the liver. So you want to test those, make sure that they're rocking, they're doing well. But if we are specifically looking at food itself, okay, I don't love to always eliminate foods, but things that might be worth bringing out for a bit would be dairy and sugar consumption. Oftentimes they can help. Okay. Fiber-rich foods, we've already talked a lot about these to clear some imbalances. And then foods that are rich in omega-3s, like animal sources, like salmon, sardines, mackerel, like the seafoods of our world, they're going to help provide your skin and really your whole body with anti-inflammatory support, which can reduce redness associated with acne and overall just like improve your skin's appearance. Seafood specifically, these ones, they contain a lot of vitamin D and vitamin A, which will improve your immune system, which can kind of keep acne in check as well. Last one, we're gonna talk about sleep. Who here has heard of like this? Is it Sleepy Girl mocktails or Sleepy Girl? What do they call it? Sleepy Girl mocktails. The reason they're popular is because tart cherry juice, and also goji berries and mushrooms, right? Those aren't usually in those cocktails, but the tart cherry juices, they contain melatonin. And so the reason people drink it with magnesium before bedtime is it's going to try to stimulate melatonin production and promote relaxation in the body. Okay, I'd be really careful if you're just going to drink juice before bed. Sometimes that can spike blood sugar. So, maybe have a well-balanced snack, which I have here as well. And then something else is to avoid alcohol before sleep if you are struggling, because even the smallest amount can hijack your REM sleep. And it's really important to make sure that we are not utilizing it before bed. And if you're somebody, we've talked about this before, if you're somebody that's waking up in the middle of the night, hungry, right, then maybe consider a balanced snack before bed. Okay, this does help alleviate a lot of issues right away. So as with, everything here, sometimes this rule 80-20 principle sounds really cringy, but it does apply. Okay, 80% of your efforts are for optimization, right? And then 20% of our efforts are for enjoyment. If you're here, it is not worth being stressed over every single ingredient of every meal. That's a disorder. It's called orthorexia. It was a very simplified version of what it is, but just know that too much of like any good thing can turn bad. All right, so just remember, like your highest self, she knows that she is here to, like I said, appreciate everything that your body's already doing, and so just implement these gradual, sustainable changes while respecting your body's natural rhythms. Okay, make sure you have some room for flexibility and compassion.